Hello, so I recorded this video on Friday right after I saw the movie, but for some reason the video quality and some of the sound didn't look right, so I was going to re-record, but I haven't found the time for that. So I think the sound is fine, but my camera video will not be in this video. I usually try to do that for my reviews, but I think it's fine. I also wanted to mention really quickly that I am not a huge Star Wars fan, and yeah, I'm sure you can guess at this point that I was not fond of the film. This is not going to be treated as a review video so much as it's going to be treated as an analysis for why this movie isn't going to do very well. I think my biggest gripes with the film are that it was a little too long. I felt like it kind of dragged a little bit, and it definitely felt like a re-edited TV show. And it just felt kind of pointless to the Mandalorian overall story. Like, I feel like you can probably skip this movie and you won't miss much. It's not an ending to the franchise or anything like that. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that really quickly here because I didn't think it would be very fair to dog on this movie as someone who isn't a huge Star Wars fan. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that really quickly. Okay. Star Wars had its first theatrical release for the first time in 7 years, and it was not good. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but I have seen all the movies and a few of the shows. Like, I've seen Ahsoka, I've seen Skeleton Crew, I've seen Andor, and I've seen the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian, which I really did like. The 3rd season I started, but I never finished because it really just wasn't my taste. And I think Disney was very aware of the fact that a lot of people didn't watch The Mandalorian Season 3. The Mandalorian and Grogu movie isn't necessarily a sequel to Season 3. As long as you've seen the first 2 seasons, you can probably watch the movie. However, the problems I had with The Mandalorian Season 3 were a lot of the problems I had with The Mandalorian and Grogu movie. This movie really does not know what to do with Grogu. It is becoming more and more obvious that Grogu is only in this movie because he sells toys. Or sold toys, past tense. Because the whole Baby Yoda thing was really a fad. Grogu sold toys during Mandalorian Seasons 1 and 2. During Season 3, not so much because why would people go buy merchandise from a season that wasn't particularly well received? And yeah, the flop that was Season 3 really stopped any forward momentum for the movie. Because when you watch this movie, it's very clear that this was initially meant to be a 4th season of the show, and was just turned into a movie because they understood that if people didn't watch Season 3, most people probably wouldn't tune in for Season 4 either. While I don't think that making this a Season 4 of The Mandalorian would have made it any better, I do think that if this movie had been marketed as the end of the Mandalorian story, as like kind of a finale, you might have gotten a larger audience when it came to streaming. And this movie doesn't really add a whole lot to the Mandalorian story, and it certainly isn't a finale. And if there ever is a Season 4 of The Mandalorian, you could probably skip this movie and it wouldn't really matter. This movie probably won't get much at the box office, but I don't really think anyone is surprised by this because no one really goes to theaters to see a movie based off a TV show. The only real exception to this is anime, but with Disney especially, those kinds of movies have literally always flopped. If Disney wants to release their shows theatrically, I think they should do what Netflix does and release the last episode or last few episodes in theaters of a show. Imagine seeing a show like WandaVision's finale in theaters. People had been speculating and making theories for months and months on that show. So that would probably have made a lot of money for Disney. Even Stranger Things, whose finale wasn't the best, still made $28 million from theaters alone. Of course, that kind of money depends on whether or not the fan reception of the show was good or bad. If the season was released on Disney Plus and no one saw it, which likely would have been the case, they wouldn't have had to waste their money by putting it into theaters. I think they were really relying on the Star Wars brand to carry this film. Even though the sequel trilogy wasn't well received, it still made $1 billion per movie. The problem with thinking the Mandalorian movie would make as much money is because the reason people didn't go to see this movie, even though it is a Star Wars movie, is because no one really cared. There was no interest in seeing the movie regardless of whether it was good or bad. with the sequel trilogy, even if it was bad, people would still go to the theaters out of interest. And I don't really think there is an interest in The Mandalorian and Grogu. Same thing with Solo flopping. Solo, a Star Wars movie, is the only other major movie from Star Wars that flopped. And I think that they thought that the Mandalorian movie, since there hadn't been a Star Wars movie in so long, would entice people to go see it in theaters. However, it's only estimated to make $91 million over the Memorial Day weekend, which is significantly lower than even Solo. And remember, big franchise movies like Star Wars movies tend to be very front-loaded. So the fact that this movie is not making more and is not following that trend means that the fans aren't feeling the urgency to go see the movie. Typically, Star Wars movies tend to make a lot of money on their first few days and then peter out as the month goes on. This movie actually made more on Friday than it did on Thursday. It made $12 million on Thursday and climbed to $33 million on Friday. And this is 100% a bad thing. Movies obviously make more money on Friday than they do on Thursday, but if the hype had been there for the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, it would have made a lot more on Thursday than on Friday. But this just means that fans aren't going to see this movie. And I don't think this is due to it being badly received. The reason it's doing so badly is because the fans of the show are the ones that watch The Mandalorian on streaming. So that fan base is probably going to wait to see it on streaming. It could have been the best Star Wars movie ever made, and I don't think it would have broken $1 billion. It may have been more profitable if it had been a good movie, but it still wouldn't have done nearly as well as a Star Wars 10 might have done, for example. Disney doesn't really release their viewership numbers, but we do know there was likely a 25 to 30% dip in viewership from season 2 to 3. So yeah, was The Mandalorian and Grogu a good movie? No. I mean, I personally wasn't offended by this movie being made, but it wasn't a good movie and had a lot of pacing issues. This was a big misstep by Star Wars and didn't do the brand much of a service. I don't think Star Wars is dead, but I do think The Mandalorian is dead. It really was a fad, and I don't see this movie selling much merch at all. People probably aren't going to go see a movie from Star Wars in theaters unless there is an episode 10 that comes out. Maybe that Ryan Gosling Starfighter movie, because people do like Ryan Gosling. Or if that Ben Solo movie ever comes out, which it probably won't, people will go see that. But if they want another $1 billion hit, it definitely will not be with a Mandalorian movie. I didn't want to treat this as much of a review because I am not the audience for The Mandalorian. I did like The Mandalorian, but I am not a huge Star Wars fan in general. So it would feel wrong just to trash this movie. Because, I mean, it was a bad movie, but it's not, like, offensively bad. So, I didn't feel the need to rip it apart. But that's all I have for today. Let me know your thoughts on the movie, and bye, I guess.